ho, ho! Merry Christmas! No, the snow is not falling quite yet in North America, but if you plan to have quilted decorations in your house for this holiday season, you better get started sewing. Island Batik has declared it's never too early, and I totally agree. So let's hop into this holiday project.
I'm Andy, and I want to help you enjoy, experiment, and excel as you quilt.
As an Island Batik ambassador for July of 2021, I was challenged to make a holiday project. I used a variety of yellow, red, green, and a little bit of blue on this fabulous rice background. Rice is part of the Island Batik foundations, and it gives fabulous texture to a variety of projects. It's a great neutral background. It has little hints of blue and green and just a touch of tans and creams, and it just is a beautiful fabric to work with, and it shows up well as a background in a lot of different blocks. I chose a variety of blocks from Holt's book, Vintage Christmas. And rather than make a wall hanging or a quilt or a table runner, I decided I needed a new Christmas tree skirt. So this quilt will go underneath my Christmas tree. That meant I did have to cut a hole in it for the tree stand. So get over your fear, it's not that bad. It came together really nicely. I designed my own layout for this Christmas tree skirt. I chose the larger 12-inch blocks from the Vintage Christmas pattern, and I just chose 11 of my favorite. The Vintage Christmas book by Holt is a great resource for classic quilt blocks. I've been a fan of Holt ever since I saw the Farm Girl quilts, and the Vintage Christmas is just more to love. She has 42 different quilt blocks, and the instructions have sizes for both 6-inch and 12-inch blocks, so you can play around for many, many quilts with the resources in this book. So I just flipped through the book to find the blocks that I wanted to include.
So many beautiful blocks to choose from. I had a lot of fun putting together these traditional star blocks with half square triangle and flying geese units.
I wanted to keep things simple because the highlight of the Christmas tree is not necessarily the wonderful quilt laying underneath, but obviously the presents that you'll stack on top. So I wanted to keep things simple and have a focal point on each side of the quilt. I love star blocks, so those were obvious choices. And then this Christmas tree ornament, the Christmas tree light, and the candy canes were fun options to include on my Christmas tree skirt. I decided to keep the 12th block as a simple 9-patch because I knew I would be slicing that half of the quilt so that my tree skirt can be thrown around the Christmas tree. And I didn't want to chop up any specific quilt block that I had pieced. I included the plain border blocks there on the edge of that row of my quilt, and then I just angled my ruler and made those ends of the Christmas tree skirt. So it's not a square, it's not a circle. I wanted to work with those octagon corners.
Once I had the quilt top together, I needed to turn it into an octagon. So I simply cut on the diagonal across those plain corners, and that made the extra sides of my tree skirt. After quilting, I needed to cut the slit in my tree skirt. So I used a kitchen bowl of approximately 6 inches diameter to trace a circle, and then I used hand scissors to cut the opening in my quilt. Because of the circular opening in my quilt, I knew I would need bias binding strips. Luckily, my friend Kimmy on Williams Street just published a tutorial for this technique, so I will link that in the description below. But you can see I had to make yards of bias binding and sew all those strips together, and then it was a pretty easy process to apply that. The next challenge for the binding was the non-square corners. Those octagon edges create a bigger angle than 90 degrees. So I used a special tool. It was very handy. The Creative Grids Angle Finder ruler helped me mark those corners, and then it was just the same process to fold the binding out of the way to make that mitered corner that I do in traditional binding. I love these monthly challenges from the Island Batik Ambassador Program. They allow my creativity to stretch and expand and try all sorts of new skills.
I want to thank our industry partners. I used Schmetz needles and Aurifil thread for all the piecing that I did in this quilt. I then put it on my long arm with Hobbs natural cotton batting, and that just worked up beautifully with this fun dancing snowflakes pantograph.
Will you be making any quilts as gifts this year? Tell me about it in the comments below. And try this table runner pattern. I bet it would look great in any fabric, any season of the year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.